Thank you. All right, so a few years ago, actually almost a decade ago, I was tweaking an alert at the company where I was working, and I accidentally set off 772 tickets all at once. I did it twice within 10 minutes. And the worst part was, I didn't know that I had done it until the entire help desk came up to my cubicle and invited me down to their space to close the 1,544 tickets for them. There was a mass close option. They wouldn't let me use it. So with a little bit of time and some therapy and perspective, maybe some alcohol, I've begun to reflect on why that happened. I mean, I think there's enough blame to go around, but was it the operator? Was it my fault? Was it the tool that let me do it? And what I've arrived at is that it was really an immature understanding of what an alert fundamentally is. So I'd like to thank you for joining me today as we talk about how alerts don't suck, your alerts suck. My name is Leon Adato. I'm a middle-aged white dude giving a conference talk for a change. There's nothing on this slide that actually matters, except that you can find me as Leon Adato on all social media, and I did pick that picture so you would feel confident that I know what the hell I'm talking about, and I do own that suit. More important is that you understand this is an oyster talk. Now what I mean is I have 30 minutes. I cannot teach you anything in 30 minutes. In fact, in that amount of time, the only thing I'm able to do is irritate you. Now, the reason I call this an oyster talk is because when an oyster gets irritated, it does one of two important things. It creates a beautiful pearl, or it dies. I sincerely hope I don't irritate you to death. Instead, I hope that I give you just the grain of an idea that you will then layer over with your own experiences until what you have is something that is personal and polished and valuable to you. Okay, the SRE handbook defines an alert as a notification intended to be read by a human and that is pushed to a system such as a bug or ticket queue, an email alias, or a pager. Now, not to blaspheme the Holy Scripture, but what the FSCK am I supposed to do with that explanation? I mean, how does that make me feel like alerts are anything except useless and pointless? And that's because the SRE handbook has failed to do the most important thing. It has failed to describe the value of an alert. Ultimately, that's what this talk is all about, how to make alerts valuable. Now, I'm not going to make you wait until the end for the big reveal or whatever. I'm going to get the most important points right out front. I have 4 of them, 4 important things that if you don't remember anything else, this is it. First, if you have an inbox rule in your email that is designed to handle all the incoming alert messages, you have already admitted defeat. You have already stated, I intend to do nothing with this alert that is important because the only time frame that matters for alerts is right now. Number 2, isn't this a beautiful hill? This is the hill I'm going to die on. FYI, alerts are trash. Oh, we don't do anything the first time we get the alert, but after we see it 4 or 5 times in a 15-minute period, then we know it's a problem. Look, buddy, I don't get paid by the bushel for this stuff. How about I just give you one alert when it's happened 4 or 5 times in 15 minutes? No FYI, we just want to let you know. That's not an alert. That's not what an alert is for. Number 3, so I was visiting my abuela, my grandmother, and we were making whatever, and we had Lipton soup, and I don't know if you all remember, but in the back of the Lipton soup boxes, they had these recipes, right? And so I showed it, I said, Abuela, look what we have. And she said, that. What is this shit? This isn't a recipe. This isn't even a vague suggestion. What does this have to do with alerts? Every one of your monitoring tools or observability tools comes with a preset package of sample alerts, and people treat them like they are best practices. They are not. They are simply examples of things you could do in the tool. Nobody wants to send out a global message when CPU is over 80% with a list of all the top running, processes sorted by memory or whatever. They're just showing you you're able to do it. So the alerts that come with your tool, they are not best practices. Do not turn them on. Maybe use them as examples, but that's it. Last of the big four, and I am grateful to Charity Majors of Honeycomb for this phrase, and I'll honor her by giving the correct, this is how she actually says it, nines don't mean shit if your users aren't happy. All right? We have something today that wasn't available when I started doing monitoring 27 years ago, and that is a direct understanding of the user's experience. Okay? When people ask me where they should start with alerts, that's it. User experience. We don't need to alert on disk array number 7 is having 7 errors or whatever. We don't need that anymore. We can alert on users are having a bad experience right now. That's where you need to start. Everything else is definitely important, right? We need to know when disks fill. We need to know when CPU spikes. We need to know that. But that is for specific teams in specific times and not always. You certainly aren't going to drag people out of bed for that. Not if users are having a perfectly fine experience. So those are the big four. All right. Again, this whole talk is designed to explain why and how alerts can have value. I'm going to share it over the next 5 lessons. The first lesson is on the fundamental nature of what alerts are. So rule number 1, alerts are not the same thing as monitoring. Rule number 2, alerts are not the same thing as monitoring. Rule number 3, just because you monitor it doesn't mean you have to alert on it. Monitor everything. Monitor the shit out of your stuff, but don't alert on every single thing you collect. Now, there's cost issues, right? We know that if you drag everything into a particular vendor's tool, you are going to have to back a Brinks truck full of cash up to their office to pay for it. There is a company that I know very well that helps you deal with that. That's it. I'm not going to do any more sales pitches, okay? But come talk to me. We're in the vendor space. But that's not the same thing as alerting, right? So don't confuse the two. So what do I mean when I talk about being biased toward action? Because alerts have to be biased toward action. Well, here's an example, okay? Every year, your boss gets back from DevOpsDays Raleigh, right? And he comes back with a new pair of socks and a shiny new monitoring tool. And the second you unwrap that sucker, the monitoring tool, not the socks, you're going to do one thing. Everyone does the same thing. You create a high CPU alert, because that's what we all do. I have a secret for you. CPU alerts are bullshit. Nobody ever cared about high CPU. It doesn't matter. If an application is consistently running at 98% CPU, but all the jobs are being processed and everything is getting done, there's a very technical term for that. It's called correctly sized. All right, I got to stop for a second. Talking about CPU alerts. Oh my gosh. Leon's going to completely oversimplify everything down to CPU and RAM and disk and bandwidth, and he's going to ignore the lived reality of everybody in this room who has to deal with a metric ass ton of metrics and events and logs and traces, pods full of containers and serverless microservices. Because what Leon is talking about is that old school grandpa monitoring, not the new observability world that we live in, right? That's possibly what was going through your heads when I was talking about CPU. And I have to say, I see this framing a lot, monitoring versus observability, and it's really not fair, it's not true. Really what we're talking about is monitoring and observability. So first I want to flesh out what I mean when I use those two different terms and how they're different and why for this talk it actually doesn't matter. So I'm about to draw a line on the slide and a line in the sand where we differentiate between monitoring and observability, and I have to be clear that I have nothing but respect for the people who lost hair and stomach lining in the flame wars of observability over the last few years. There's 3 pillars, there's 5 pillars, there's 2 pillars, whatever. Okay, I do not mean any offense to anybody who had passionate arguments about the differences. I am simply defining this for the purposes of this talk. That's it. All right. So monitoring deals with the known unknowns. We know what might break, we just don't know when. Monitoring also deals with any cardinality. It could happen all the time, that's fine. It might be super rare, that's okay too. Monitoring cares about or has mostly manual correlation. The only way to know that an application is having a problem because this query is running slow and this disk is having a problem, whatever, is human manually correlating that information together. That tends to be the monitoring mentality. Also, domain-specific signals, meaning the things that tell me that my bandwidth is bad are fundamentally different than the things that tell me that my disk array is bad. There are different signals and different metrics that tell me those things. That's on the monitoring side of things. Meanwhile, observability tends to focus on the unknown unknowns. We have no idea what might go wrong, and we definitely don't know when that'll happen. Also, high cardinality, very rare events are the things that observability tools tend to help you focus in on. And also, correlation is baked in for a reason that I'll get to in a minute, but it needs to because it's dealing with a large amount of data coming from a wide range of sources. And finally, there are what are called golden signals, signals that are the same signals, which is latency, traffic, errors, and saturation, that tend to tell you that something is going wrong no matter what the thing is that we're talking about. So that's observability versus, or the differences, at least my differences, between those two mindsets, all right? So let's go back to that data, right? The correlation has to be baked in because observability tends to take a massive amount, once again, a metric ass ton of data coming from a disparate range of sources. And so you need to have the tool do the correlation for you. Now, a lot of people will say that's AI, which we in this room know is a bullshit marketing term for 3 if statements in a trench coat. Okay, I can't do that. My tool has AI in it, and everyone else's does. Look, as much as we all have to deal with tools that have AI jammed into every orifice in the wrong place, the fact is that if I had to pick one place where machine learning that could handle a giant data set of constantly changing telemetry and information, if I had to pick one place where that was useful, monitoring observability would be the place. That's really where it works. However, if your vendor's tool has nothing more than a ragged up instance of ChatGPT, that is how you pronounce it, then you are missing the boat. You might want to look for something that's doing something a little bit more intense. Okay, back to my point. I am not saying that my thoughts on alerts don't apply to observability. They absolutely do. It's just challenging in 30 minutes to give detailed examples when the scope is so large. So I tend to give examples that are more simple and simplistic, simply for the sake of argument and discussion today, but it does apply to everything. All right, back on track. Alerts have to matter to you, of course, but more importantly, to whoever's getting them. Now, what do I mean when I say that alerts have to matter? The point of an alert is there's a very simple algorithm. The point of an alert is to get somebody, a real human, to do something right now about a problem that is happening right now. That is fundamentally when you need an alert. Okay, Leon, but sometimes that's not true. What do I do if that's not the case? All right, if it does not involve a human, but all the other things are true, then you're talking about automation. If it doesn't have to happen right now, then you're talking about a report. If it's not a problem, but people need to know about it to be able to reference it, it's a dashboard. And if no one is ever going to do anything about it, throw it away. It's taking up compute and money and mental space. Once again, there are no FYI alerts. So there are some common pitfalls when it comes to making alerts matter, okay? And the first is the trigger condition itself, all right? So let's go back to the CPU alert. Again, simple and simplistic, but it works. I said, high CPU by itself doesn't matter, but what if I have more jobs in the CPU queue than I have CPUs on the system to deal with it? And also, the situation is lasting longer than 5 minutes. And also, people are abandoning the app or doing other, having other sorts of, again, user-based experiences. And also CPU is high. Now we have an actionable situation. But what I've just defined is way more than a high CPU alert. Okay? So the first thing is think about what really defines I'm going to now do something about this and create an alert that matches that. Don't you look for a canary in the coal mine, single metric or single variable because they don't exist and they're too simple, and you end up with a lot of false alerts, which creates a lot of drag on the team because they're constantly chasing things that aren't real. And the fact is that most robust modern tools will allow you to build complex alert statements. Okay, sometimes the problem isn't the trigger, but the time frame. Okay, everyone looks at this, and I say, well, where did the problem happen? And everyone knows immediately where the problem happened. The problem happened there. Except the problem didn't happen there. That was when we realized that we didn't have a lot of volume, a lot of traffic on the system, and so elastic compute just dropped a whole bunch of instances. And so from a perspective standpoint, everything spiked, but it was all okay. What everyone misses is that. That is the same rise. That's the same 4,000 whatevers. But our human brains don't see that. People build alerts usually for a sudden death trigger. And most of the time, the problems that we experience in our world are not sudden death. They're slow and over time. So use the tool to look over wider time frames for that same kind of change. The third pitfall is using fixed thresholds. All right, I want to know when it's over 80%, which is always stupid, but whatever. Okay, well, most of these systems are fine. One of them is not. Okay, better is to use a threshold based on a baseline. What is normal for this system? And now I want to know when it's 10% higher. That's when you want to know, because normal for one system might be running at 88, 89, 95%. That's normal. So I don't want to trigger on it when it's just running normal. Meanwhile, I have other systems in the middle that suddenly had a spike. I want to know about that. I want to know why there was that kind of rise. But the problem is that if you look at some of those, they're still really low. Like, I don't want to know about that anyway. So you want to combine the two things. You want to have a fixed low threshold for a warning and a high fixed threshold for an alert that's based on a baseline. That way you are triggering when something is abnormal and also actionable. That's another pitfall that people run into. The fourth trap is having a lack of automation. Disk full, again, simple example, right? Disk full, 90%, okay? The thing that you're going to do right now is clear the temp directory. Everybody always, when you see any kind of it's full, the first thing you do is you dump temp file. Why do you have to wake someone up at 2 o'clock in the morning to dump the temp files? Or something similar? Why would I do that? I'm not an asshole. I wouldn't abuse people like that, right? Why don't I create automation that dumps the temp files, and then if the problem still is persisting, now I have to go do something about it, all right? But that's a thing that I see people miss all the time, the opportunity to have automation do those simple things first before even cutting a ticket, all right? So one of the most powerful aspects of alerts is that they are there to witness the exact moment when the problem happens. Nothing can be more effective than the right response at exactly the right moment, okay? And some folks skip it because they don't know what to do. But the truth is, figuring out what automation should do is easy. All you need to do is find the person who is responding to the ticket right now and ask them, what do you do when you get this ticket? Oh, first I type the Grafrinkle command. Hi, buddy, how about I do the Grafrinkle command for you? And then I'll give you the output of the Grafrinkle command and tell you what happened. How about that? There we go. What do you do about it? And the cool part about these conversations is that they lead to automation routines that you would never think of, but they're really effective and comprehensible. For example, all right, so let's see, apps are not being provisioned in Kubernetes. That's the problem. It happened, okay? So what do you do about it? Well, the first thing everyone does is they add more to the warm pool. Then automation will wait a minute, 2 minutes, 5 seconds, whatever, okay? If the problem is persisting, it hasn't cleared up, then you apply a patch to the existing service and wait. And then, if it's still, then you reload the image, or you migrate it, or you do whatever, right? And you wait. And then you burn it with fire. It must be possessed. Ah, okay, fine, no. You send a ticket. But look at what just happened. If you were the human at the bottom of that chain of events, and you got a ticket that said, I did this, this was the output. I did this, this was the output. I did this, this was the output. You are now teleported 20 minutes into the future as soon as you look at that information, because it already did the things for you. Super effective, but people forget about it when they're creating alerts. And that takes me to the most important lesson of all, talking to people. I know. We don't like to talk to people. We don't like to talk at all. But we do need to do that. We need to talk to people nicely, not like a psychopathic homicidal clown, but probably with the same determination as the world's greatest detective, who is now on the trail of the real killer of MyApp123. The only way to understand how critical an application or an issue is, the only way to understand how much someone cares about performance of that application is to talk to them and get that context. So I call this the hunt for the useful alert, because the person that you talk to isn't necessarily the person who asks for the alert. See, the person who asks for the alert is usually there to check a box, and they will lie to you. They will say, oh no, this application is rock solid. It's made of unicorn spit and angel farts. It's never going down. All we need is the basic whatever. And then you find out the poor slob who gets the ticket at 2 o'clock in the morning, yeah, that's not their experience, right? You want to find that person and say, all right, what's going on? All right? And then when you find them, there are some questions that I ask all the time that help me build an alert that is very useful to that person. First of all, how do you know when something is wrong? Let's start there. What is it that, and not the customer calls me. Like, that is a bad answer. How do you know, like, okay, fine, the customer calls and you want to verify that there's something wrong. What do? Oh, I typed the Grafrinkle command in there. By the way, there is no Grafrinkle command. Do not look it up. It's not one of those weird esoteric Linux things. I just made it up. So I typed the Grafrinkle command in, and it tells me blah, blah, blah. Hey, how about I make that part of my alert trigger? I'll run the Grafrinkle command every 5 minutes or whatever, and we'll get that data out. How do you know when something went wrong? How do you know when it's all better? No one ever asks this. Everyone thinks of alerts as being like, well, it happened, and now it's not happening, so it's all better. No, because a lot of times, and again, simple example, disk space. When the disk is over 80%, I know it's bad. When it's at 79%, it's all good? No. It needs to be below 75% for more than 15 minutes. But that is very different than the trigger. So find out what better looks like when somebody can go back to bed. That will be your, now, if you're tied to a ticketing system, and my God, you should be tied to a ticketing system, don't tell me you're doing alerts straight to email. That's ridiculous in this day and age. It's the year of our tech 2026 already. You want to make sure that your ticketing system doesn't auto-close. It reverses the ticket. It's fine. You open a ticket, fabulous. If it reverses the situation before a human responds to it, you don't want to close the ticket, you want to reverse it. That way the human knows there's something to check out, but it's not critical anymore. Next question. Is there a knowledge article for this? Because if there isn't, there needs to be. I'm not building an alert until there's a knowledge base article. I know that gets really like, I'm the Department of No, but my gosh. That person isn't always going to be the one who responds to it. And if all the knowledge of how to respond is up here, you got a problem. There needs to be some knowledge article that is actually referenced in the alert message. The alert message says, blah, 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 blah happened, refer here for more information. And if the knowledge base article says, call Bob, all right, sucks to be Bob, but okay. But there needs to be a knowledge article. Last question. Can you make it happen on purpose? You'd be amazed at the number of times where people ask for alerts having no idea how to actually trigger them. They have no idea if the condition is actually real or if it's worse than they thought. I had one person ask me, every time the log says error, I need you to cut a ticket. Until they got 1,000 in the first 5 minutes because there was a constant message of no error found, no error found, no error found. So can you make this happen on purpose? Show me. Now there's a class of alerts where you don't want that. Like we have a alert that tells us when the data center is on fire. Okay, make it happen on purpose isn't the real thing. Joking aside, when you have things like that where you can't trigger it because bad things happen, just reverse the trigger value when the data center is not on fire and just make sure that it works as advertised. Okay. Questions that help you nail down an actual useful alert. All right. And remember, the goal of alerts is that they have to have value. Value to the recipient, absolutely, but also make sure that the business understands the value. So the immediate question is, how do I know the cost? So I create, this is very simplistic, right? It can get way more than that. I have a whole different talk that talks about this. Okay, but I look at the name of the alert. How much does it cost the business to fix it without an alert? How long does it take to notice it? How long does it take to respond to it? How many people are involved, et cetera, okay? What's the cost with the alert? With the alert, we notice it much faster, therefore the impact is lower, et cetera. And so then how many times did it trigger last month? Now I know how much I just saved the business. This is great information to share with your management. I did this once, and I talked to the manager, and I said, you know what? I just saved you $8,000 per month in perpetuity, because every time this thing triggers, you're saving money. So I would like 10% of that back in my budget for more monitoring. They immediately said, oh, well, that's not how budgets work. I mean, it's not, we didn't really save the money. We didn't say, oh, great, it's not important, I'll turn the alert off. No, don't do that, right? You can have some really funny conversations. But if you cannot explain the value of this to the business, they have no reason why to understand why they would continue to pay for it, what it's doing for them. And this is really easy. This is a simple database query, right? And you can populate it really fast. Now, people will ask me, how did you get those numbers, Leanne? How did you know that the cost is this much without and this much with? So I gave wrong answers publicly, and people jumped all over me. I said, oh yeah, this application is $670,000 per minute. It is not! When you give a wrong answer, people are really fast to correct you, so that's how I got the right numbers. It worked. Okay. So let's sum up. We have identified and discussed the situation with the ticket recipient. We've designed alerts that matter because it has real-world trigger elements, it takes duration and baseline into account, it includes automation. We have verified that the alert is built with the intent of immediate action by a human. And we have communicated that value to the business so they let us keep on doing our job. Fabulous. We're all ready. Done, right? All done. Lesson number 5. You're not done yet. You're never going to be done yet. Go back regularly to those recipients of those alerts. Ask them, is it going the way you thought it was going to? Is it still doing what you want? Have the user behaviors changed so that this alert is no longer correct, either specific elements of it or the entire thing is no longer useful? Whether you go back every quarter or every 6 months or every year, whatever, you have to remember to go back to those recipients and find out what's working. Find out what's missing. Oh, now we need this. Now we need that. Far from being punished for your good deed, this is evidence of your success. When people come to you and they say, this alert's working great, but I need this other one now. That means that they now recognize the value that alerting has to them as either owners of an application or a service or as leaders of the business. Because ultimately, the alert is doing its job. It's removing interruptions and toil from their workflow. All right, congratulations, you survived. We have another raffle. Yet another one. Use the QR code. You can sign up for this raffle, which is a iHome Sunrise. It's a branded, I don't know, it's a thing. It's an IoT thing. It'll probably hack half your house, whatever. Look, maybe put the slide in there. All right? All right, I'll be back on this one. Don't worry. All right. Meanwhile, if you're feeling irritated, I warned you that could happen. But this might be time for you to take that grain of an idea and start to layer over your own experiences. Meanwhile, I am ready for your questions. Thank you very much.